I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The clock read 2:47 a.m. My house on the outskirts of Seattle had always been quiet, but that night, the silence shattered like thin glass. I'm Jessica, a 43-year-old nurse, used to solitude since my husband passed away 5 years ago. But that sound, it wasn't the random creak of floorboards. It was deliberate. Heavy. Too close. My heart thudded as I lay still, straining to hear over the hum of the rain outside. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle, right outside my bedroom door. The room was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtains, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. I held my breath, convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe the old house was settling, or the wind was rattling the windows. But then the doorknob turned, slowly, with a metallic groan that made my stomach twist. I sat up, clutching the blanket, my mind racing. I lived alone. Well, almost alone. My son, Ryan, 19, had been staying with me for the past few weeks after dropping out of college. He'd been distant lately, moody, spending hours locked in his room or out with friends until dawn. Could it be him? The door creaked open, and a shadow stretched across the floor. It was tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakably human. Ryan. I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer. The figure stepped closer, and I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, my fingers clumsy with panic. Light flooded the room, and there he was, my son, standing in the doorway, his face pale, eyes glassy. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, his dark hair messy like he'd just rolled out of bed. But something was off. His expression was blank, almost vacant, like he wasn't fully there. Ryan, what are you doing? I asked, pulling the blanket tighter around me. He didn't respond. Instead, he took another step forward, his bare feet silent on the hardwood. My pulse quickened. Go back to bed, I said, firmer this time, hoping my tone would snap him out of whatever this was. He stopped, tilting his head slightly, as if studying me. Then, without a word, he turned and shuffled back into the dark hallway. The door clicked shut behind him. I didn't sleep that night. The image of him standing there, silent and strange, burned into my mind. It wasn't the first time Ryan had acted oddly since he'd come home, but this felt different. Unsettling. I told myself it was just sleepwalking. He'd done it as a kid once or twice, or maybe he'd had too much to drink with his friends. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The rain kept falling outside, a steady drum against the roof, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had just happened. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, my body heavy with exhaustion. The house smelled faintly of damp wood and stale air, a reminder of how old this place was, built in the 70s, with creaky floors and windows that never quite sealed right. I found Ryan sprawled on the couch in the living room, still in the same clothes from the night before. The TV was on, muted, some late-night infomercial flickering across the screen, selling knives or miracle cleaners or something equally useless. I stood there for a moment, watching him sleep, trying to reconcile the boy I'd raised with the stranger he'd become. His chest rose and fell unevenly, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead, catching the gray light filtering through the blinds. He looked younger when he slept, almost like the kid he used to be, before everything changed. I decided not to bring up the night before, not yet. I needed coffee, clarity, something to steady my nerves. As I brewed a pot in the kitchen, the hiss of the machine cutting through the quiet, I heard him stir. "Morning," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes as he shuffled in. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept either, and he moved with a sluggishness that made me wonder if he'd been up as late as I had. "Morning," I replied, keeping my tone light, pouring the coffee into a chipped blue mug. "You okay? You were up late." He froze for a split second, just long enough for me to notice, then nodded. "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." He grabbed a glass from the cupboard, filled it with water from the sink, and downed it in one long gulp, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to ask more, why he'd been in my room, what was going through his head, but the words stuck in my throat, heavy and unformed. Instead, I said, "You should get some rest today. You look tired." He muttered something I didn't catch, maybe a yeah or a sure, and disappeared back to his room, the door closing with a soft thud. The day passed uneventfully after that, Or at least as uneventfully as it could, with that nagging unease still coiled in my chest. I went through the motions, made toast, checked emails, stared out the window at the soggy backyard, but my mind kept circling back to him, to that blank look on his face, to the way he'd stood there in the dark. Ryan hadn't always been this way. Growing up, he was a sweet kid, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of boy who'd bring me wildflowers he'd picked from the yard, their roots still clumped with dirt. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his crayons, drawing lopsided houses and stick-figure families, chattering about school or the stray cat he'd seen down the street. After his father died in a car accident, though, something shifted. He was 14 then, gangly and awkward, just starting to grow into his height, and the loss hit him hard. It hit us both, really, but I had work to keep me busy. Long shifts at the hospital, charts to fill out, patients to tend to. Ryan didn't have that. He stopped talking as much, started hanging out with a rougher crowd, kids with ripped jeans and cigarettes dangling from their lips. By the time he graduated high school, he was a different person, distant, restless, like he was searching for something he couldn't name. College was supposed to be his fresh start. He'd enrolled in a state school 2 hours away, studying engineering, something his dad had always wanted for him. I'd driven him there myself, helped him unpack in his cramped dorm room, left him with a hug and a promise to call. But 3 months ago, he called me late at night, voice flat, saying he wasn't going back. "It's not for me, Mom," he'd said, the line crackling with static. "I'll figure it out." The next day, he showed up at my door with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a half-hearted smile tugging at his lips. I didn't push him. I figured he needed time, a safe place to land. So I let him stay. At first, it was fine. He'd help with chores, mow the lawn with the old push mower that rattled like it was about to fall apart, even cook dinner once or twice, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, but still, it was something. But over the weeks, he started pulling away. He'd sleep all day, the blinds in his room drawn tight, then leave at night, coming back reeking of smoke and something sharper I couldn't place. Maybe weed, maybe something worse. I'd ask where he'd been, who he was with, but he'd just shrug and say, "Out," his voice clipped, like I was prying too much. I didn't want to nag. He was an adult now, after all, or at least he was supposed to be, but the tension grew, thick and unspoken, filling the spaces between us. And then came the little things. The way he'd stare at me sometimes, too long, too quiet, his eyes lingering as I chopped vegetables or folded towels. The way he'd linger in the kitchen while I cooked, leaning against the counter, not saying a word, just watching. I brushed it off as him being lost, maybe lonely, maybe just bored. But after that night in my room, I wasn't so sure anymore. The days after that first incident were a blur of unease. I kept busy with work. 12-hour shifts at the hospital, stitching up wounds, taking vitals, smiling at patients through my own exhaustion. But the house felt different when I came home. Smaller, somehow. More shadowed. I'd catch Ryan watching me from across the room, his eyes following me as I moved through the house, carrying groceries or sorting mail. Once, while I was folding laundry in the living room, the TV droning with some nature documentary about whales, he sat on the armchair nearby, silent, his hands fidgeting in his lap. His nails were bitten down to the quick, I noticed, something he hadn't done since he was a kid. "You need something?" I asked, trying to sound casual, folding a faded gray t-shirt that used to be his dad's. He shook his head, his jaw tight, and left without a word, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Another time, I came home from a late shift, my scrubs stiff with dried sweat, and found him standing in the hallway, just outside my room, staring at the closed door. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting his shadow long and thin against the wall. When he saw me, he flinched, mumbled an excuse about looking for the bathroom, even though it was on the other side of the house, and walked away, his shoulders hunched. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump, every shadow seemed to move just out of sight. I'd double-check the locks, keep my phone close, even sleep with a small flashlight by my bed, its cold metal a strange comfort against my palm. I told myself I was overreacting. Ryan was my son, not some intruder. He wouldn't hurt me. He couldn't. But the way he looked at me, the way he hovered, it wasn't normal. It wasn't right. I started locking my bedroom door at night, something I hadn't done since Ryan was a toddler, afraid of monsters under his bed. Now, I wasn't sure who the monster was. A week after that first night, it happened again. I'd fallen asleep with the lamp on, a paperback novel open on my chest. Some mystery I'd picked up at the thrift store, the pages yellowed and dog-eared, when I heard the doorknob rattle. My eyes snapped open, and I saw the handle twist, stop, then twist again. The lock held, a small click of resistance that felt louder than it should have. "Ryan." I called, my voice sharp, cutting through the stillness. The rattling stopped. I waited, barely breathing, my fingers gripping the edge of the blanket, until I heard footsteps retreat down the hall, slow and uneven. I lay there, heart pounding, staring at the door, half expecting it to swing open anyway. It didn't. Morning came gray and damp, the sky outside a heavy blanket of clouds. I found Ryan in the kitchen, eating cereal, a bowl of soggy cornflakes sitting in front of him on the scratched wooden table. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes bleary, and kept eating, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway, my arms crossed. He glanced up, spoon halfway to his mouth. "About what?" he asked, his tone flat, like he already knew. "About you coming to my room at night. Twice now. What's going on, Ryan?" His face didn't change, but his hand tightened around the spoon, his knuckles whitening. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, setting the spoon down with a deliberate slowness that made my skin prickle. "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer, my voice rising despite myself. "I heard you last night. I saw you the first time. Why are you doing this?" For a long moment, he just stared at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, the kitchen silent except for the hum of the fridge. Then he stood towering over me. He'd gotten so tall these past few years, broader too, his frame filling the space, and said, "You're imagining things, Mom. Maybe you're tired from work." His voice was calm, too calm, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm not imagining anything," I snapped. "You're acting strange, and it's scaring me. Tell me what's wrong." He didn't answer. He just looked at me, his jaw tight, then brushed past me, his shoulder grazing mine as he headed to his room. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the house, and I stood there, shaking, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to call someone. A friend, a counselor, even the police. But what would I say? That my son was creeping around at night, making me uncomfortable? It sounded ridiculous, even to me, like something out of a bad movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, terribly off. The next few days were tense, a fragile stalemate. Ryan stayed in his room most of the time, the door closed, faint music seeping through the walls. Some band I didn't recognize, old distorted guitars and mumbled lyrics. I kept my distance, busying myself with work and chores, trying to pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't. I'd catch glimpses of him, grabbing a soda from the fridge, slouched on the couch with his phone, and each time, I'd feel that same unease, a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. I started noticing things I hadn't before, how he'd leave his shoes by the back door, caked with mud even though it hadn't rained in days, how the trash can was full of energy drink cans, more than I'd ever seen him drink, how his laundry pile grew but he never washed it, just let it sit there, a tangle of dark fabric. It was like he was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. I tried talking to him again, casually, over dinner one night. Frozen pizza I'd thrown in the oven, the kitchen warm with the smell of melted cheese. "So, what's your plan?" I asked, cutting a slice, keeping my eyes on the plate. "You going to look for a job, maybe?" He shrugged, picking at the crust. "Dunno. Maybe." His voice was monotone, his gaze fixed on the table. "You can't just sit around forever, Ryan," I said, trying to sound gentle. "You need something to do." He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in days, and there was something in them, anger, maybe, or frustration, that made me pause. "I'll figure it out," he said, sharp, and pushed his plate away, half the pizza untouched. He left the table without another word, and I sat there, the kitchen suddenly too quiet, the hum of the oven fan filling the void. 2 days later, I got my first real clue. I'd taken a rare day off from the hospital, my head pounding from lack of sleep, and decided to clean the house. Something mindless to keep my hands busy and my thoughts at bay. Ryan was out, gone since breakfast with a mumbled "see ya," as he grabbed his jacket and keys. I started in the living room, vacuuming the faded rug, dusting the shelves cluttered with old photos and knickknacks. Ryan's soccer trophy from 5th grade, a ceramic bird my mom had given me years ago. Then I moved to his room, something I hadn't done since he'd moved back. I told myself I wasn't snooping, just tidying up, but the state of it stopped me cold. It was a mess, clothes strewn across the floor, some stained with what looked like coffee or dirt, empty soda cans and crumpled chip bags on the desk, a faint stale smell hanging in the air, like sweat and unwashed sheets. His bed was unmade, the blanket twisted into a knot, and a stack of comic books teetered on the nightstand, their covers creased. I sighed, picking up a hoodie from the floor, when I noticed something sticking out from under the mattress. A corner of a notebook, spiral-bound, its edges worn. I hesitated. It wasn't my business, not really, but after everything, the footsteps, the staring, the locked doors, I had to know. I slid it out, my hands trembling slightly, and opened it. The pages were filled with his handwriting, jagged and messy, dates scrawled in the margins like a log. At first, it seemed harmless. Random thoughts, complaints about college, professors don't care, just want your money, sketches of trees and buildings, a doodle of a car with flames on the sides. But as I flipped further, the tone changed. The entries grew darker, more personal, the ink pressed harder into the paper. And then I saw my name. Mom looked tired today. She doesn't get it. I watch her sometimes, when she's not paying attention. She's still pretty, even after everything. I don't know why I keep thinking about her like this. It's messed up. I can't stop. My breath caught, a cold wave washing over me. I kept reading, page after page, his words spilling out like a confession he never meant to share. He wrote about how I moved. She bends over the sink washing dishes, doesn't see me, what I wore. That blue sweater, the one with the holes in the sleeves, she looks soft in it, how he felt when I was near. Heart beats too fast, like I'm doing something wrong. It wasn't just observations. It was obsession, confusion, guilt, all tangled together, laid bare in black ink. One entry, dated a week ago, made my knees buckle. I went to her room last night. I don't know why. I just stood there. She didn't wake up. I wanted to stay. I shouldn't have. I dropped the notebook, my chest tight, the room spinning around me. This wasn't sleepwalking or teenage rebellion. This was something else, something I didn't know how to face. My son, my own flesh and blood, was wrestling with thoughts he couldn't control, thoughts that crossed lines I couldn't even comprehend. I didn't touch the notebook again that day. I left it on the bed half open, and walked out of his room, closing the door behind me. My hands shook as I poured a glass of water in the kitchen, the faucet sputtering before the stream steadied. I drank it slowly, staring out the window at the backyard, the overgrown grass, the rusted swing set Ryan used to love, now tilting to one side. My mind raced, piecing together the past few weeks, the months, the years. How had I missed this? I'd been so caught up in my own survival, grieving my husband, working overtime, keeping the bills paid, that I hadn't seen him slipping away. Or maybe I had, and I'd just ignored it, hoping he'd sort himself out. That night, Ryan came home late, the front door creaking as he stepped inside. I was waiting in the living room, the notebook on the coffee table between us like a loaded gun. He stopped when he saw it, his face paling, his jacket still zipped up to his chin. "You went through my stuff," he said, voice low, accusatory. "I had to," I replied, standing, my legs unsteady. "Ryan, what is this? What's happening to you?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the notebook, then at me, his jaw tight, his hands balling into fists at his sides. Finally, he sank onto the couch, head in his hands, his elbows digging into his knees. "I don't know," he whispered, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "I don't know what's wrong with me." I sat across from him, keeping the table between us, my arms crossed tight over my chest. "You need to tell me everything. Now." It came out in fragments, halting and raw, like he was pulling the words from somewhere deep and jagged. He talked about college, how he'd hated it, felt trapped, like he was failing at something he never wanted in the first place. How coming home had grounded him at first, made him feel safe, but then twisted into something else, something he couldn't name. He couldn't explain it fully, just that being around me in this house had stirred up emotions he didn't understand. Grief, anger, longing, all knotted together. "I'd never hurt you," he said, voice breaking, his hands raking through his hair. "I swear. I don't know how to stop feeling this way. I listened, my heart breaking and my stomach churning all at once, a storm of love and fear and disbelief crashing through me. This wasn't the boy I'd raised, the one who'd clung to me after nightmares or laughed at my terrible pancake shapes. This was a young man drowning in his own mind, caught in a storm of pain that had warped into something unhealthy, something neither of us knew how to fix. And I'd missed it. I'd been too busy working, surviving, to see how far he'd drifted, or maybe I'd seen it and hadn't wanted to believe it. We sat there for a long time, the silence stretching between us, heavy and thick. The living room felt smaller than ever, the walls pressing in, the old clock on the mantel ticking too loud. I didn't know what to say, how to bridge the gap that had opened up between us. Finally, I spoke, my voice softer than I meant it to be. You need help, Ryan. This isn't something we can just ignore. He nodded barely, his head still bowed. Yeah, he said, the word rough like it hurt to say. I know. We didn't solve it that night. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes, no magic words to make it all go away. But we agreed he needed help, professional help, someone who could untangle what I couldn't. The next day, I called a therapist, a woman I'd heard about through a coworker, someone who specialized in young adults, in family dynamics, in the messy stuff we couldn't face alone. She was kind on the phone, her voice steady, and she promised to see Ryan the following week. I didn't tell her everything, just that he was struggling, that we were struggling, that we needed guidance. Ryan didn't fight it, which surprised me. He just nodded when I told him, his eyes distant, and started packing a bag. He moved out a few days later, staying with a friend from high school, someone he'd reconnected with since coming home. A quiet kid named Matt who worked at a hardware store and seemed steady enough. I drove him there, the car silent except for the hum of the engine and the slap of the wipers against the windshield. When we pulled up to Matt's apartment, a squat brick building with peeling paint, Ryan turned to me, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice small, almost lost in the sound of the rain. I didn't mean for this. I nodded, my throat tight. I know. Just take care of yourself, okay? He got out, the door slamming shut, and I watched him disappear into the building, his figure blurred by the wet glass. The house was emptier after that, the quiet settling in like dust. I changed the locks, not out of fear, not really, but for peace of mind, a small ritual to mark a new start. I kept working, kept living, but it was different now. I'd sleep with the flashlight by my bed some nights, even though I didn't need it anymore, its weight a reminder of those weeks when I didn't feel safe. I'd walk past Ryan's room, the door closed, and wonder if I'd ever really known him, or if I'd ever really known myself. The truth wasn't what I'd expected when this all started. I'd braced myself for something sinister, something dark and deliberate, but it wasn't that. It was pain, his, mine, ours, left to fester too long, ignored in the rush of daily life. Ryan wasn't a monster, just a kid who'd lost his way, carrying wounds I hadn't seen until they spilled over. And I wasn't a perfect mother, just a woman trying to hold it together, stumbling through grief and guilt and love all at once. He's been in therapy for a month now. We talk sometimes, short calls, awkward at first but getting easier. He's working part-time at a warehouse, saving up, trying to find his footing. I don't know if we'll ever be what we were, that uncomplicated mother and son from years ago, but I hope we can be something else, something honest, something healed. The house is quiet again now, too quiet maybe, but I sleep with the door unlocked, a small act of faith. I keep going, one shift, one day, one step at a time, and I tell myself that's enough for now.